Hi, thanks for tuning in to Front Porch Conversations here at Advent Christian Village. Today we're at the Harmony Center and my guest is Arlene Hodge. Arlene, thank you so much for sitting down and visiting with me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I know our viewers are going to learn a lot about you and the amazing things that you've done in your life. Let's start by telling them where you were born and where you grew up.
I was born on Cape Cod in Massachusetts in Santuit. I was born at home back at a time where the family doctor did everything, including delivering babies. And I grew up actually right on Cape Cod. We never went past the bridge and all because actually I'm Portuguese on my mother's and father's side. And they came from the Azores, which is a little island off Portugal in the North Atlantic. And they were very primitive people and all. It was harder for them to assimilate into the culture. So it actually is first generation and all. My grandparents, especially my grandmother, just spoke Portuguese. They would not teach us because they wanted to have private conversations. And they didn't want us to understand what they were saying. And so I grew up there. My dad actually had a lot of problems with alcohol, and my mother had problems with mental illness, and so we didn't even realize our family was dysfunctional because we thought everybody lived that way. But it was a life of just work. We never had a vacation. But it was really a good, especially for my sister, my brother, and myself. We were the three older children. And it was a good way for us to grow up, to be responsible and self-sufficient and all. And I praise God for my childhood and all. I grew up right there on the Cape. And if you know anything about Cape Cod, there's a very rich people there, the DuPonts, the Kennedys, the Schaefer Pen people, the Carter's Ink Pen that live right on the ocean and all. It's very exclusive. Most of the people at that time in Cape Cod, especially those without an education, were actually servants or caretakers or something of that sort and all. But I went to school in high school, and I truthfully never thought of myself as being discriminated against in any way. Back in that time, everybody had an opportunity at an education, and I graduated from high school. I planned to go to college to become a veterinarian at one time. But because of my mother's problems and all, when I graduated from high school, I took my college money and I moved my mother and my two brothers to Virginia, where my sister lived. She was married to a gentleman in the Navy. And that was where my real life began.
Well, tell us, how many siblings did you have?
Actually, I had a sister that was 18 months older than me, a brother that was 5 years younger. And then many years later, my mother had another baby. And when I was 15, she gave me the greatest gift because I thought she had that baby just for me. I loved him, and his name was Paul. And he was just a joy to me. My mother was so incapacitated at that time that she hardly got out of bed and all. So I was able to care for my brother, get him ready for bed, and then go back to school the next day. And it was really a blessing for me. And then actually in 1961, in the same year that my mother had my last brother, I was married by that time. I had my first child, and my sister had her second child, all in 1961. And I'm sorry, yes, 1961. And actually, I thought that was pretty unique that we all had babies at that time.
When you talked about your childhood years were very important to you, what was a special thing that you really remember?
I remember as a child that because it was during the war, my daddy was in Corpus Christi, Texas, and we went by train, Pullman car, to Texas to be with my daddy. And the big hurricane came through that year, and I remember laying on the floor of the school on pallets, and all we would see were rubber boots and raincoats and kerosene lanterns as the people went by to keep us safe. And when we got back to the little, well, actually, it was a little shack right by the border where the Navy people were housed. They brought out huge rattlesnakes on poles and all from where they were out in the water. And they actually, my mother had to set us up on a bunk bed because the water was already in the little cabin. And that was really one of my first childhood memories, really.
That would be one to remember.
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you feel about snakes now?
I don't, well, I was actually bitten by a ground rattler at one time when my children were little, and I went to the hospital. They gave me the anti-venom, and I just prayed to the Lord because we had a little girl that had Down syndrome. I felt she couldn't be without her mama. So I left it up to the Lord, and it actually saved my life because they kept telling me it would be hard to breathe and all, but it never was. God took care of everything. And I went home after about 4 days, and actually I was not supposed to move around a lot because the poison was still in my system. And the doctors actually told me, they said, no, go home and rest. You don't tell a mama with 2 children to go home and rest. And when I got up, I got a terrible case of hives. And I called the doctor because the poison was still in my system. And he told me, he said, you're not going to do what I say anyway. He said, so don't bother calling me back.
Oh.
So,
talk about a good bedside manner.
Right. They didn't have them in those days.
I know. Where did you and your husband meet?
We met in Norfolk, Virginia when I moved my mom there, and my 2 brothers. I actually worked nights so that I could help to take care of my littlest brother during the day. And I was a curb hop at Shoney's, big boy, because that was a job I could work at night. I met my husband there, and he, from the first time he saw me, he said, let's just skip the preliminaries and just get married. And I thought that was very strange. But he was a wonderful Southern boy and all. And we did, actually, he got out of the service on August the 8th. We got married on the 11th. We eloped to Carolinas, and we were married. We had a wonderful marriage for 62 years till he passed away. I kind of get clouded up still. Well,
would you share a little bit about your children?
We had a son, and he is actually a truck driver in Live Oak. He is local. He married a very sweet lady, and they have 2 children. My daughter-in-law's name is Shauna, and we have a granddaughter, Ariel, she just re-upped in the Navy to be in a helicopter squadron and go to sea. She's never really been on a boat before, but she's a very brave young lady. And then our younger granddaughter is going to police academy, and she's almost through with police academy.
Well, it certainly looks like public services in both of their minds and careers.
Well, her dad was in the Navy, her grandpa was in the Navy, so they have a history there. And they're very, they really excel at what they do.
And it sounds like you're a proud grandma.
Oh, yes, I am. But the joy of my life actually were my children, and we had a little daughter that had Down syndrome. And back then, you know, they called it being mongoloid child, and they called them retarded. And she was a special gift from God. And at that time, they encouraged you to put your child like in some land training center. Mm-hmm. And we said, no, we're going to take her home and love her. And it was a blessing. It was just a gift from God. She lived to be 17, and that was 10 years longer than they really gave Down syndrome children, mm-hmm. you know, a life expectancy. And it was, the Lord just took her sweetly in her sleep one night. She's with the Lord in heaven now.
And I know you have to have special happiness knowing that that's where she is.
Oh my goodness, yes. And it taught us so much about kindness and patience and love. And I love being a caregiver. I was able to keep her at home with me for 17 years. And then the Lord was just training me to be able to take care of my husband when he ended up having Parkinson's and Lewy body. And that is how we came to be here at Advent Christian Village.
Well, you've talked a lot about the Lord. When did you meet the Lord?
Actually, it was after I met my husband. As you know, probably a lot of people on, up north, you're either Catholic or you're Protestant. I was brought up Catholic, but I never knew about having a personal relationship with Jesus till after I came to Florida with my husband, and he had the most wonderful Southern family. They did barbecues, they did family reunions, things that we never had. Mm-hmm. I began to go to church with my mother and father-in-law. My mother-in-law gave me my first Bible. It was her Bible, so I could go to church with them. And I went to a little storefront meeting with them, and there was a Tennessee preacher there that really preached, and he was all over the place. And at first, when I got there, I thought, oh, my Lord, what am I doing here? And then he gave the altar call, and he quoted John 3:16, and I gave the Lord my heart then, and I never looked back. And Jesus has been my life since then, and he's carried me through. We had a mobile home that caught fire in the middle of the night, and we all got safely out. The Lord delivered us from that. Just so much that God has done for me. And then now he's comforting me with the loss of my husband. And I appreciate him so much for that. And I can't help but cry. I'm sorry.
Tears are joy escaping at times, aren't they?
Yes, and I would like to say about Advent Christian Village that toward the end of my husband's illness, I was not able to keep him at home safely. We lived right on the highway, and he was a much taller man than me and stronger and all, and he still had, even with the confusion, he had a lot of strength and all, and I was always afraid that at night or something, if I would fall asleep and he would go out on the highway. And finally, when he actually needed care, Good Samaritan was so good to him. He was there only 2 months before he passed away, but they took him in, and I can't say enough good about his care. And they let me go every day. I got a little travel trailer and moved in Park of the Pines so I could be with him every day. So I went every day, I cared for him. And the last week, when he was bedridden, they actually let me stay day and night. And I can never thank them enough for that. And I do know that this is where God would have me to be. And I just want to serve him here till the day I die.
And I know from watching you in your neighborhood, you do serve every day.
I love the people there. You know, when I first moved in, and it's a miracle how I got that little trailer, because there really was nothing available. And after 3 months, I wouldn't have been able to stay at Park of the Pines, you know, because it's transitory.
Mm-hmm, right, actually Tresca Park, right?
Yes, Tresca Park, yes. And that little sweet house that I live in, right next to Miss Jenny, it became available. God had provided enough money in my bank account that I could buy it. And I could actually look at my little camper trailer and look over and see my house. And I moved in that in March, and right away my neighbors, like Miss Liz and her husband, they brought me a plant. Miss Jenny and Miss Phyllis brought me a fruit basket and made me welcome. And it's just a wonderful place to be. It is. And you know, during the storm, we had to evacuate and all, and the village gave us a place at Smith Cottage and all. We all had a room. All the ladies that were there had pets and all. And it was a wonderful thing for them to do, and it was no charge. And I think, where else could you find that? Nowhere but here.
How did you learn about the village?
Actually, my husband and I were planning to move from Lakeland, where we lived for 44 years, to North Central Florida, because we felt it was safer, and we always loved it in this area. So one day when we visited my son and daughter-in-law in Live Oak, we passed by Advent Christian Village, and the Lord put it in my heart then that that was where I would love to be and all. But it didn't work out right at that time and all. So when we came by one time for my, actually my granddaughters were in one of the programs that they had here for the school children and all. That was the first time we visited it. And I just thought, this is where we needed to be in our old age and all, you know, because truthfully, even the first night I moved here in my little travel trailer, I had never lived in a travel trailer before, and I couldn't close the door that night. And there was a couple in a trailer right next to me, and I kept banging the door, and then I said, I can't be doing this at 10 o'clock at night. And I just took, I frequently wear dresses. Well, I had a dress on, and it had a belt to it. I just tied the belt to the door and the cabinet by the side of the door. I laid down and I fell asleep. Perfect peace. And all. And of course, Mr. Steve Banks is over that, and he takes care of all those old ladies. If we ever need anything, he's right there. And of course, Ashley Scarborough is my caseworker, and you couldn't ask for a sweeter, more attentive person than she is. So I'm here and I love it.
Well, you and I first met really right after the storm, and you had some damage to your mobile home. This is the recent hurricane.
Right.
And but despite that, you were busy helping your neighbor, and that's...
Well, I love those ladies, and they, you know, they're so sweet. Miss Phyllis watches over her sister and all, you know, and I got to know them, and I felt so good to be doing something, because I had actually been kind of feeling sorry for myself, and that's not for me. And I was able to stay busy, and then I could go home at night because I was actually tired from working, and I could sleep and not lay there all night and think.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a blessing to me to be able to help. And they were such sweet people there. They really are.
Well, and during the course of the several days that we were involved in helping Miss Jenny get packed up and out of her mobile home, there were so many other neighbors just in and out helping, and
And you were always there. You were always finding who we needed to take out everything and all. And I appreciated you so much for that, because you were truthfully a very good and faithful friend to her.
Well, we've known each other quite a long, both she and her sister.
Right.
When now that you can get in and out your front door, tell us about that.
Well, my porch was completely destroyed and all, and then of course a limb went through the roof in the kitchen, and actually the first night that it rained, it hadn't been tarped yet, and they had already taken the limb out, so there was a hole in the roof, and the leak actually drained in my kitchen sink. It didn't get on the floor anywhere. That was God's hand. That was God's hand directing it. And my actually porch door was still intact, but I had to cut the bottom screen to crawl through and get to my door to get into the house and all. And that was how I got in and out. And it was compared to like Miss Jenny or even Miss Kathy next door. I didn't have that much damage, and my insurance has already come through and paid. I'm just waiting on, I think I'll have to have a contractor, because some of I think the beams are still coming through.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all been taken care of, and I know it's going to get done again one day and all. But it's just been a really, I can see God's hand in when you think of the trees that came down and all, and what they could have done, and God just directed everything where nobody was harmed in the village, and I think over 1,000 trees went down. It's just amazing what God does for us, and I can't help but thank Him and praise Him, because that was His awesome, mighty power. And He's good in the storm. He's good to us in the storm. And we have to praise Him for that. And I appreciate the fact that you're allowing me to say that and all, because people need to know how good God is.
And to me, you're a wonderful witness to that.
Well, it's all about the Lord. I really didn't want this to be about me. I want it to be about how God helps us through everything and all. And the trials and the tests that we have, He's right there with us, and He's just growing us in His ways. And I appreciate Him for that. And I want to thank you all for allowing me to, give my testimony about God's goodness.
Would you tell us what you've done other than being a great neighbor to people since you've been at the village?
Well, actually, I love to go to the nursing home, and I'm visiting there, and I love the church service that Pastor Bruce gives and all. And
that's at Good Samaritan Center, right?
Yes, it is. And I went there Sunday and all, and I'm hoping that I've already got my application in as a volunteer and all, and I'm hoping to, find a place there where I can, use my time and all for the Lord, because I'm not, I have to stay busy. And but it's, they do a wonderful job there, considering what, especially in the memory unit, how they could do everything and still keep the residents safe and all. And I appreciate so much what they did for my husband. God provided an answer when there was no answer, and it was here, and I'm grateful for that. I really am.
During the time you were married, did you and your husband live mostly in the Lakeland area?
We lived in the same house for 44 years, and it was in rural Lakeland, and we didn't have air conditioning, but we had a ceiling attic fan, and at one time we had a potbelly stove and all, and that was where we raised our children. We had 10 acres and kind of a corner tucked away, but Lakeland grew and all so much that it really wasn't the community it had been where we raised our children and all. And so that was why we moved to North Central Florida. We were actually 5 minutes away from where my brother lived and all. And he actually, when I left my house to come and stay